Our next speaker is Connor Boyack. He's president of the Disabilities Institute here in Utah, and it's a libertarian think tank organization. Connor got involved years ago. He's actually, and I've said this before, he's spoken at our conferences, but he's kind of the reason this exists because he gave me a book years ago, or pointed me at one called Teach the Children, an Agency Approach to Education. And because of that, I got involved creating this kind of organization and doing these conferences. So Connor's passion, though, is he's got a passion for education, for one thing, but he advocates every day for us for limited government and constitutional principles through his organization. And he's got a fantastic book series. How many of you have read or seen the Tuttle Twins? Okay, quite a few of you. So I've read all those with my kids, and they're great little books. Even as an adult, I love reading the principles in them. And I don't know if he was going to say this, but I'm pretty excited. He's got 3 choose-your-own-adventure books coming out of the Tuttle Twins for teens. So I'll probably share those with my kids when I'm done with them. But anyway, Connor today is going to talk to us about a brand new book. Well, he's not going to talk to us about the book, but you've probably seen, there's a stack of books back there he'll mention. Skipping college. A lot of us send our kids off to college. We don't know what's going to happen when they're there. I'll tell you this, when my third daughter went to SUU, a conservative college, her first semester she was told Benjamin Franklin didn't believe in God. Thankfully, she knew enough to at least question what her professor had said and looked it up, and she was like, Dad, yeah, he believed in God, right? Yeah, he did. And so Connor's going to talk to us about some options that you have instead of college, because frankly, colleges are quite the continuation of the conveyor belt, taking people down the same road of activism and indoctrination. And so please welcome Connor Boyack.
Thank you, Oak. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm glad that Kirk broke the precedent. Oak was behind the podium, and I'm kind of a nervous wanderer, and Kirk was unleashed, right? He was out here. I'm like, okay, that means I have permission to do that as well. At Libertas, we actually just moved offices a couple weeks ago. We've been hiring more people and growing, and it's a good problem to have, so we need a new office space. We move out all the furniture, and there is a ring on the carpet around my desk, because whenever I'm on the phone, I literally just pace back and forth around my desk over and over and over again. So I appreciate freedom. I guess that's what it's about. It's kind of my personality. I want to start with a story. Storytelling is how we learn. It's what, in fact, the neuroscience behind story is really fascinating in terms of the addiction that we have for information when you couch it in a story. That's why we do the Tuttle Twins, is because rather than sitting down a 6-year-old and saying, hey, now we're going to teach you about free markets, or yeah, we're going to teach you about property rights, like, okay, kill me now, right? Like, why do I care about that? But if it's in a story, kids don't even understand that they're learning this fun stuff. It's just a story, right? So the story I want to start today begins June 25th, 2010. It's a warm afternoon in New York. There's a bunch of 18-year-olds out on a field sitting in chairs, not unlike these ones. Their butts are getting kind of sore. They're sitting there for a while. They're dressed in fancy robes and funny hats. This is graduation day. It's a public high school graduation, packed full, big audience. Up on stand, who is it? It's the principal, the assistant principal, the teachers, the administrators. Everyone's beaming, looking out at kind of the byproduct of what they've done, right? This is kind of the crop that we've been fertilizing and harvesting. How wonderful this is. 18-year-old Erica Goldson makes her way up onto the stage to speak. She's the valedictorian. Beaming with pride, all the administrators behind her and all of her teachers are like, all right, here's the creme de la creme, right? This is kind of our grade A product for what we've been doing. Erica's nervous, as any 18-year-old would be, getting up on stage in front of all of her peers. And behind her, like lasers on her back, all the people that have been teaching her and working with her over the years. Here's how Erica starts her remarks. I cannot say that I am any more intelligent than my peers. I can attest that I am only the best at doing what I am told and working the system. So then imagine you're the teachers and you're the principal sitting behind her like, oh crap, what is she gonna say, right? This is supposed to be the motivational speech and look what we've accomplished. We have our whole lives ahead of us. So she continues. She says, yet here I stand, and I'm supposed to be proud that I have completed this period of indoctrination. I will leave in the fall to go on to the next phase expected of me in order to receive a paper document that certifies that I am capable of work. But I contest that I am a human being, a thinker, an adventurer, not a worker. A worker is someone who is trapped within repetition, a slave of the system set up before him. But now I have successfully shown that I was the best slave. I did what I was told to the extreme. And by now they're like, you know, where's that cane to like pull them like off of the stage and cut the mic? Well, for some reason they didn't, so she continued. While others sat in class and doodled to later become great artists, I sat in class to take notes and become a great test taker. While others would come to class without their homework done because they were reading about an interest of theirs, I never missed an assignment. While others were creating music and writing lyrics, I decided to do extra credit even though I never needed it. So I wonder, why did I even want this position of valedictorian? Sure, I earned it, but what will come of it? When I leave educational institutionalism, will I be successful or forever lost? I have no clue about what I want to do with my life. I have no interests because I saw every subject of study as work, and I excelled at every subject just for the purpose of excelling, not learning. And quite frankly, now I'm scared. Burn, right? Like that is just not what you want to hear as the principal of a school watching your valedictorian speak to her peers. This went viral as it could in 2010 when, you know, Facebook and whatever was not as widely used as it is now. I used that story in a previous book of mine called Passion-Driven Education. That book is all about how we can center learning around a child's interests. Rather than speaking to children in a foreign language, today we're going to talk about algebra, or today we're going to talk about physics, and you speak in variables and weird terms that they've never heard before. You're basically making them learn different languages. Instead, for example, at the time when I wrote the book, my son was very passionate about Angry Birds. And so I would teach him basic algebra using Angry Birds. And so he was learning about Angry Birds. We would talk about science. What's gravity? Why, when you fling them up, do they come back down? And there's an Angry Birds space game. There's all these different like Angry Birds variations, and one's in space, and there's these like meteoroids, right? And you can fling them around, and we could talk about physics in the context of Angry Birds. It was very useful for me as a parent to help my children learn subjects that they otherwise maybe wouldn't really care about. So I went around speaking all sorts of different places, doing a presentation before I actually wrote the book. And when I decided to write the book, there was an individual who I really wanted to write the foreword of the book. And I'm guessing we'll get a lot of hands, but by show of hands, who here has heard of John Taylor Gatto? Probably a very well-known name in this room. For those who haven't heard of John, he was a 30-year teacher in New York, actually. Maybe, hopefully he wasn't Erica Goldson's teacher, probably not. But he was a 30-year teacher. In the very same year where he was awarded New York State Teacher of the Year, he penned an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal titled, "I Quit, I Think," in which he laid bare the problems with public schooling after his decades-long career and said, "I'm hurting children. I want to help children. If anyone knows of a job where I can help children instead of hurt children, please let me know." He quit, wrote some books, went on a public speaking tour, and became a very well-known name. He is the reason I homeschool my children. And the ladies in the room are, you know, honestly, my wife homeschools our children, right? I'm moral support, financial support. She does the work, and I help a little bit and take a lot of credit for it. But it was because John Taylor Gatto wrote his book, Dumbing Us Down. Anyone read Dumbing Us Down? All right, we got a dozen or so hands. Fantastic book. Very eye-opening for me when I read that, thinking, oh my gosh, this is exactly why I didn't like school. What Oak was saying before about, you know, people set up this system and people try and traverse their way through the system. I cheated a ton. A lot. As a straight-edge Mormon kid who didn't do anything else that was wrong, I cheated because I did not want to be in school. I did not enjoy the experience, and I didn't find value in like 2/3 of the stuff that I was being taught. And yet so much of my success was being contingent upon this arbitrary process. You gotta get the grade, you gotta get the diploma, you gotta get the paperwork. Okay, fine. Like if you're holding me hostage, I'm sorry, but if I'm in enemy territory and I'm being held hostage, I'm not gonna be like nice and diplomatic and truthful. I'm gonna do like subterfuge, right? Guerrilla warfare tactics. I'm gonna try and like defeat that enemy to get my freedom. And so that's how I saw school. So John was very gracious enough to write the foreword for that book because it was very aligned with his vision. And as much fun as that was, it was a few years later when I would start to get questions from, so my kids are young, my kids are 10 and 8. But as people were reading this book, a lot of the questions would come up and they'd say, well, what about college? What about college? What about college? And I began to notice a trend that even among the readers of that book and the circles that I run in, you know, my wife runs or manages our homeschool co-op that our kids go to, I would start to observe this trend that I hadn't really confronted before, and that was like 80–90% of these homeschool families who were John Taylor Gatto fans, and yeah, we hate conveyor belts, and yeah, there's all these problems with the system and standards and treating everyone the same. They would all have their sights set for their children on going to college. And for me, that felt like an incongruence. Now, as provocative as the title of the book is, it's literally called just Skip College. It contains its own qualifiers that for many people and for certain careers, college makes total sense. If you are very intentional about why you're going, you understand all the ramifications of going, the opportunity costs, the trade-offs that come with going, fantastic, right? Go to college, no problem. But if you're on a conveyor belt, if you're there because your parents want you to be there, if you're there because you don't know what you're doing, if you're there to discover yourself, if you're there because that's what cultural expectations are, those are all the wrong reasons to go to college. So I was talking with John about it and decided to write this book. And by write, I mean that I actually edited it. I did a chapter and then I got a bunch of other smart people to contribute chapters for this book. And please, at lunch, go grab a copy. I know a few of you have. I brought them for you, and so please grab a copy before you leave. Well, in talking with John about it, he agreed to write a chapter for the book because he agreed that many people reading his writings had interpreted them only in the context of K through 12. And they were failing to apply those same criticisms and concerns and perspective to college. Because let's be honest, college is a continuation of the K through 12 conveyor belt, and the substantive difference is that you don't need to ask permission to go to the bathroom. That's like the bonus of going to college, right? There's a little bit of freedom. You get to kind of choose what you want to learn. You get to choose which college, but you know, we have those choices in K through 12 as well. You can choose which school you want to go to. They have different learning styles and things that you can learn. Right? Substantively speaking, college is a continuation of the conveyor belt, and John agreed. So he said, all right, let's write a chapter. What we didn't know at the time was that it would be the last thing that he would write. He passed away 1 year ago yesterday. And so that book has his last thing that he had written, talking about how the conveyor belt of education applies to college and why it's such a concern. So that was the problem that we perceived, is that homeschoolers who by and large are understanding of and critical of the conveyor belt and the problems that come with it, we're not catching on to the fact that those same criticisms apply to the college experience. So that's what the book, the purpose is for, is to kind of say, all right, we've got all these people on a conveyor belt, let's throw up kind of the warning signs and the detour signs just so people know they don't have to like just stay on that same conveyor belt through adulthood, like, hey, you can turn left here, and hey, look at this shiny experience, and there's a casino over here, and there's a fun thing over here, right? Like there's other attractions that you can go to. My motivation for working on this book was born of my own experience. As I said, I cheated profusely through school, went to BYU, and I can't say that the cheating stopped when before I went to the Loyola University. So I've since repented. I didn't cheat as much. But I was in the frame of mind where I was on a conveyor belt. It was just what you do. I was not intentional about anything. I was doing what was expected of me. I was not presented with any alternatives. I didn't know that alternatives even existed to go and search for. This was 1999, so I was on America Online with the, you know, like the internet was very slow and there's hardly anything and you could chat with people, but there wasn't this exposure of information and options that there is today. So I had no idea to go looking for anything. My parents kind of shepherded me on that conveyor belt and off I went to BYU. And didn't have an enjoyable experience. I mean, I loved my friends and I loved the environment and I sometimes loved the football team, but not always. And you know, the cultural aspects were all great. It was great for networking. It was a lot of fun. But the academic experience was substandard for me because it was so restraining on what I wanted to learn about. What's interesting now as I look back with a bit of perspective, for those of you who know what we do at Libertas, we basically, the quick pitch is we change hearts, minds, and laws in favor of freedom. And so we're involved in public policy, and we're writing op-eds, and we're writing laws, and we're advocating up at the Capitol, and we're doing legal research, and we're having big stakeholder meetings with all these government people trying to change the law. And to do that type of thing successfully, you got to be good at writing, which is, you know, English. You got to be good at economics if you're a free market think tank, right? You got to know your history as well. So those are kind of the three core subjects that I look for when I hire people as part of our team. Those were the subjects that I did the worst at in college. So did anyone take Econ 101 at BYU within the past couple decades? Anyone in this room? Anyone have Dr. Curl? All right, we got a couple. Your daughter had Dr. Curl. I had Dr. Curl. Nice guy, I'm sure, but man, I had a miserable experience because that class turned me off of economics, which is hilarious because like 2 months ago, I launched an economics course for families called Free Market Rules, teaching free markets to families, but in a fun, meaningful, relevant way. Because I'm sitting in this class at college learning economics, so turned off. Because like, you know that chart that Oak was showing, like risk reward? You know, it was like 80 charts every class about random supply demand curves and the intersectionality of blah, blah, blah. And like, I am just bored out of my mind. It wasn't relevant. It wasn't meaningful. It wasn't speaking to me as an individual about trying to make sense of the world. Same thing with history. I mean, same thing with English. I remember, you know, sitting down with the textbook and they're trying to hammer into me, what's the past perfect subjunctive of this? I'm like, what? Like, who cares what these terms are called? I just want to know how to use them and how to like write fluidly and persuasively. And so it was after college when I experienced an amount of freedom where I no longer had homework and tests and activities and deadlines and everything, where I just began my own self-study to go and experiment and pursue what I was interested in. I finally found the freedom that I had where, coupled with access to all this information, I self-taught myself in all those things. I only took one econ class and I got a D. I got C's in my English classes. I took like one history class before I jumped over to something else. Did not enjoy it. I think I got like a B- if I was lucky. I was turned off and I didn't do well. But when I had the freedom of self-discovery and being able to manage my own time, everything changed. And now it's such a weird experience. I tell my wife Jody all the time, I'll be in these meetings with like academics and lawyers and the governor and the attorney general's, you know, person, and like I'm toe to toe with them on whatever issue we're talking about, and I'm just like a washed up web developer who didn't do that well in college, and yet here I am, right? But that shows that we don't need college to succeed. And the whole purpose of this book is to expose, especially teenagers, but even their parents as well, who sometimes need more persuasion than the teenagers do, that you don't necessarily need to have the formal training of college to be successful in what you want to do. The benefit that we have now that I didn't 2 decades ago is that we are in a different world. So there was a survey done, I think it was a few years ago, of human resource directors. These are the people at big companies that are hiring other people. And the simple question to them was, do you require a college degree in order to hire someone? 90% of them, and these are the big companies around the world, said, no, we no longer do. We're very open to hiring someone who doesn't have it. And it was, I think I wrote it down here so I wouldn't forget, 47% of them, felt that college did not prepare students for the working world. Part of the problem with college, I think as I've talked to people as I've worked on this book and done some speaking about it, is that a lot of the older generation have this rosy idea of college. right? This liberal arts education, and we're gonna shape kind of my child into this like studious, contributing member of society. And there are many institutions where if you go there, that is definitely the product that you will have output for. That is not most colleges. Most colleges and the governments that fund them and so forth treat college as being, what do they call K through 12? Being college and career ready, right? That's the whole focus of the conveyor belt. We want to get you ready to college, then we want you to get a good job. It's job training. And if you're honest and talking to most young people who are on that conveyor belt and going to college, that's how they see it. They don't see it as this world-class liberal arts education to shape me into a person who's a critical thinker and I can go off into the world and do whatever. Most of them perceive it as job training. Surveys validate this quite heavily. And so if that's the case, if the predominant reason for going to college is that it's job training, we have to question if in the year 2019 that's really the case. I'll use me again as an example. So I went to college and I came out a web developer. And I went to go get my first job and they asked me, we looked over my resume, they said, what did you learn in school? And I had to show them what I learned in school. It was insufficient to just say, I went to BYU and I graduated in information technology. They wanted me to demonstrate that I knew how to do what I supposedly learned how to do. So I got the job, great. I then applied for another job a couple years later. They couldn't care less about my college experience, my GPA, the degree, nothing. All they want to know was my last job, because measuring someone's success in job performance is only as valid as whatever you last did. They don't care about 10 years ago. They don't care about college. They want to see, well, what did you do at that last company? How current are you? What have you learned? What can you be able to perform and what do you know how to do? Fundamentally, going to college is really about acquiring a signal, okay? We call it a degree. You're getting a degree, but you're there to purchase a degree. What's interesting about that is if you go to college for social reasons, if you even go for academic reasons, you can audit classes, you can sit in on classes, you can learn what's being taught. That's not why people go to college, right? They don't audit classes. They don't, go to a library and study on their own. They're going to purchase a piece of paper, as Erica Goldston said, at the end that validates to whatever employer who sees it, I know how to do things, hire me. That's all a degree really is. It's a signal. It's a signal to employers that you are worth something to them, right? Because if it was all about self-discovery and becoming a critical thinker, you can do that as, the Thomas Jeffersons of yesteryear did and just get an apprentice, or not apprentice, get a mentor, or go sit in a library, or today just go online and watch a ton of YouTube videos, right? There are tons of ways to learn and build your own character and personality and knowledge absent going to college. College is about the degree. The degree is a signal. So the real question for the parents in the crowd and the rising generation who's going on this conveyor belt is, what are other ways that you can signal to a potential employer that you are worth something? When you get the book, make sure that you, at a minimum, turn to page 90. So page 90 was a chapter written by Isaac Morehouse. He runs a company I highly recommend any of you look into if you're intrigued by this, called Praxis. Praxis is basically an apprenticeship boot camp on steroids where they let you skip the four-year college track. They have this kind of like entrepreneurial, critical thinking, what do you even call it? Kind of this little training that they do that's very intense. And then they place you in an internship in the field that you're interested in going into. It's a paid internship, effectively, so you pay nothing for this entire program. It's cost neutral. You're guaranteed pay at that job, and the average people coming out of practice, I think, earn like $54,000 their first year or something like that. And what's funny is now that they've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, they have people who are now in middle management, senior positions who are employing their same age peers coming out of college with $80,000 in school debt that have no experience, and yet they're the same age, but they went through totally different tracks. So Praxis is an amazing organization. He's actually launched another company called Crash, which if I have a quick moment, I'll talk about. But on that page, and talking about a signal, here's what Isaac says. He says, I stumbled upon what economists call the signaling theory of education. In a nutshell, you don't go to college to learn. Abundant evidence shows that learning doesn't really happen even for the subjects studied. And the subjects studied are almost entirely irrelevant to success in the real world, personal or professional. You go to college to get a signal. The piece of paper conferred upon graduation is the product. It is the entire product. not the classes or the sports or the parties or social networking or any other stuff associated with the college bundle. All those things could be had for free. Anyone could move to a college town, sit in on classes without registering, go to parties and all the rest. But people don't do this. They register. The other stuff may be an added benefit, but the paper is why people pay. The paper is a signal, and signals are valuable. But the degree is a particular kind of signal that is now dead. Most people don't realize it yet, but the sooner you understand this, the better you'll be. The degree signal is only valuable in the absence of something better. That something better is possible, and it's vastly cheaper, faster, more effective, and more fun. So as I wrap up, just imagine a different scenario. You've got your traditional college graduate who has an impressive resume of all their GPA and all their college clubs they were in and whatever, and they're one of 142 resumes for this really cool job. On the other hand, the person hiring gets this email, or better yet, the CEO or some other management position, they get this email from someone saying, I really love your product. I've been using it for the past couple of months. I've been subscribed to your email newsletter, and I've noticed that you can have a little bit of improvement if you do this and this. And I saw on Twitter, you only post every couple of days, but I think you'd have way better strategic social engagement if you did these things. Here's a portfolio where I did this for my dad's company at no cost, and here's the percentage increase in ROI that I benefited them. I'd love to work for your company for free for a month in order to show you what I can do for you. And if you let me do that and like what you see, then we can talk about hiring me. Like, night and day, right? If you've got hustle, if you've got grit, and the internet makes it stupid easy to do this kind of stuff and directly approach anyone, tweet at them, connect with them on LinkedIn, right? You don't have to go through the bureaucracy like you used to 20 years ago where there's the formal process and you have to get shepherded along the way. No, for anyone who has the hustle, you can get like any job you want without a college degree, because as a person who's now in the position of hiring people, my policy director, he went to school, college, to learn genealogy. Has nothing to do with what he's doing now. He didn't even graduate. I don't care, because he has taken it upon himself to build a portfolio and gain experience working for free, volunteering, connecting with people, and gaining the ability to learn the information that's now useful to me as his employer. I couldn't care less about a degree, right? This is the case with like half the people who I employ. I don't even ask the question. In fact, I hired an executive assistant a couple months ago now, and she sheepishly gave me her resume as I was interviewing people. She said, well, I actually dropped out of college because X, Y, Z reasons to go pursue some other stuff. And I was kind of nervous about you seeing that, but then I saw online that you wrote a book called Skip College, so you probably don't care. I'm like, you're right, I don't. And she got the job. Not because of that, but in spite of not going to college, I didn't care. For lack of time, we can't get into all the amazing opportunities that there are for those who are looking for an alternative path to that conveyor belt. Many of them are mentioned in the book, so go and grab it. But if we are critical of a conveyor belt, if we do understand that one size does not fit all, if we understand some of the things that Oak even mentioned, the social cost and so the propaganda and the bias and so many of the problems in these modern educational institutions, the cost, $1.5 trillion, and I mean, I don't want to be saddled with that. I don't want my children to be saddled with that, right? There's so many better ways if those who are looking. My fault and the blame that I cast on my parents, and they know I do, I talk about it in the book, lovingly so, is that they never helped expose me. They didn't even know, right? And so it's not really their fault. But it is almost intentional to stay on the conveyor belt today with so many of these flashy signs along the way, helping us understand all the different options that are out there. If we're saying, no, college, this is what we're going to do, okay, again, if you're intentional about it, no problem, do that. But we can't fault our ignorance when there's so many options. So grab the book, read about them. I consider it so important that, especially for those of us who are really excited about agency-based education, education choice, having different options, let's not give diversity and freedom into the K through 12 experience and then funnel everyone through that same college experience when there are a lot of negatives and there are a lot of opportunity costs. I wonder for myself about how much ahead in life I would be and so many different things I would have done if I didn't go to college, and if I had that freedom to start learning economics and history and English, the things I now value the most, at an earlier stage in a much more fun and personally relevant way. So the purpose of my being here today is simply to expose you to that opportunity, please feel free to take a copy of the book. I think especially we see some of the critical decisions that the rising generation are making and how these campuses are basically institutions of democratic socialism indoctrination and not, classical liberal critical thinking, self-improvement. It's incumbent upon especially the parents in the room to make sure that we're exposing the teens and the preteens and others among us to these alternatives. So anyways, thank you for your time. I appreciate being here. That's a great question. So to repeat the question, there's a child with a little bit of a learning disability. There's the opportunity to go to college. What should that situation be? The hard thing for anyone in my position, I remember on my political side, Ron Paul, when he was running for president, I was a big supporter. And he would continually tell people, people would ask him all the time, what should I do? I want to be like you and whatever. I want to fight for freedom. And he'd always say, I have no clue. You're your own person. You know what I mean? That's the situation I see myself in when I get these questions is that I don't know the personal situation. What I've seen in other situations, other families that have been there, is not making any decision that commits you to the long term. So I know of a couple cases that come to mind where there are some learning disabilities, and what they've done, kind of like on Oak's slide, he talked about you can do dual enrollment, right? As a homeschooler, you can go dabble in some public school classes. So don't say, we're gonna do 4 years of college. Maybe it's, let's go take a couple classes at this campus, let's go audit a class over this other campus, let's do this online thing instead. Tons of colleges now put their entire courses online for free, right? You're not gonna get that signal. You're not purchasing the diploma that's very costly. But if it's about the education, you can find this stuff for free. My encouragement would be, don't pick one thing, pick 4 or 5 and maintain the freedom. It's like when people go from public schooling to homeschooling, the biggest recommendation that I and others have is to do deschooling, right? Where basically for every year of public schooling, you spend a month of nothing, just to kind of give yourself that transition and that freedom to kind of embrace that. I think it's the same way with stuff like this, is that don't feel like you have to commit yourself to anything. Go dabble, right? And you're gonna learn through discovery what's gonna work best for that particular situation. So speaking generalities, that's kind of the best I think I can do. Yes, sir?
You hire someone and you look at their college education, don't just say, hey, they began something and then they finished it. There's a lot of people who aren't finishers. At least you're getting a certificate that shows you're also a finisher.
Great question. Everyone probably heard that. He projected really well. That, I think, is one of the more compelling arguments and more one of the traditional ones, I would say. That's kind of a very conventional argument in behalf of college. To that, I would say that when you build a different signal outside of the college system, you're showing, I think, what employers care more about is, do you have the commitment to achieve specific products and have output? Not, do you have the commitment to sit in a chair, right, and do what you're told. The industrial model of education very much is aligned with that type of command and control, can you follow orders, can you kind of be the cog in the machine? I think what the future of our economy allows and provides, you look at people, they have side hustles and they're driving for Lyft and then they're working over here. I think what personally as an employer and a lot of these employers that we talk about in the book, what they're more interested in is productivity, creativity, thinking outside the box, being kind of your own entrepreneurial person. I value most the employees who challenge me. I don't want to be the industrial, okay, cogs, you will now go here. My employees that I value the most are telling me what to do. They're giving me things to do. They're owning themselves because they've been on that trajectory of kind of building their own future outside of kind of the traditional, yes, I know, what to do because I've been told what to do. I want people thinking outside the box. So I think it's kind of a couple different paradigm models. Not that one is inherently problematic, but I think one is much more the conveyor belt industrial model of education, and one is kind of this decentralized, creative, different one. And they're complementary to some degree, but I think it's just kind of the two different models. And I'm sure I've gone over now. Anyways, I'll pause there. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.